Welcome to a different kind of true crime. Slow, careful, and non-graphic. These are stories about patterns, procedures, and the tiny choices that change outcomes. If this resonates, please like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing the map light up. Now, settle in. Our first story begins on a quiet hospital night, where the data whispers before anyone dares to. The night it starts. It's Tuesday, just after 2 a.m. The floor is quiet. Hall lights hum. A TV in an empty room plays a cooking show. On the whiteboard, the charge nurse has drawn a small coffee cup at 3 a.m., a little joke for the team. Room 414. Patrick Lane, 69, recovering from pneumonia. He's been stable all night. Low oxygen support. Good vitals. He told the evening nurse he's excited to FaceTime his granddaughter in the morning. 2:07 a.m. The monitor chirps, a check me alert. A nurse tech peeks in. Patient looks okay. Calls the desk. 2:10 a.m. The alarm escalates. Code blue, room 414. Footsteps, doors, the crash cart. A good team looks like choreography. Backboard, meds, recorder, compressions, airway, timestamps, fast, quiet, focused. Front and center, like always, is Philip Crane, patient care tech 2. 4 years here. He's in the room before the overhead call ends, gloves on, calm voice. He directs people. Staff feel relief when he shows up. They work the code. It runs long. At 2:31 a.m., the attending calls it. Mr. Lane is gone. They step back, curtain drawn. The hallway exhales. The charge nurse taps Philip's shoulder. Good job. You were right there, he says. We did what we could. He always says that. Paperwork begins. It's a sad night, but not unheard of. Older patients can crash without warning. You document. You debrief. This time, they don't move on. 3 hours later, there's another code on the unit. 2 nights earlier, there were 2 codes on one shift. A 10-year nurse finally says the thing everyone feels. This is too many. Why hospitals audit? When something feels wrong, hospitals pull the receipts. The data trail modern systems create without trying. Monitors log who silences alarms and changes limits. Badge readers log every door entry. The electronic record timestamps charting. Pharmacy cabinets record every open, take and return. Even staff elevators log rides at 2 a.m. After Mr. Lane's death, Quality and Safety opens an occurrence review. It's a checklist, not a witch hunt. Orders, meds, notes, labs, equipment function. If the system failed, fix it. This review gets an extra set of eyes. Dr. Laura Voss, data analyst, ex-tech industry. Headphones, spreadsheets, answers. Not dramatic, just precise. Her first question is simple and exact. Show me the last 90 days of code blues on this floor. She gets day, time, room, outcome, staff present. She builds a grid. She colors by shift and day. An hour later, she's at the nurse manager's door with a printout. Do your codes spike on Tuesday, Thursday nights? She asks. They're not supposed to, the manager says. They do, Laura says, and not by a little. A pattern you don't want. 90 days of emergencies on a calendar tell stories. Random events scatter. Non-random events cluster. The cluster, Tuesday, Thursday night shift, has nearly triple the codes of other nights. Tighter still, most fall between 1:30 and 3:30 a.m., the thinnest staffing window. Could be chance. Bad luck comes in streaks. Laura layers staff assignments, charge nurse, respiratory coverage, ICU float, techs. One name keeps appearing on the spiking nights. Philip Crane. Careful now. Good techs are assigned to busy units. Of course they show up for crises. That is the job. So Laura does the control test. She circles nights. Philip is not on the unit. Days off, switched units, home. On those nights, codes drop sharply. Still could be coincidence. Investigations stack small things until they stop looking small. Door logs next. Badges don't lie. Philip's badge pings outside rooms he wasn't assigned. 1 minute here, 3 minutes there. No charting afterward. No vitals entered. Maybe he's being helpful, answering call lights, bathroom help, untangling an IV line. You don't chart every small kindness. So she checks a different system, monitor audit trails. Monitors log a lot, silences, limit changes, lead disconnects, hallway panel alerts toggled off, on. 2 different nights, about 15 minutes before codes in 2 different rooms, someone toggled alarm settings that shouldn't be touched. Last badge to ping those rooms before the toggles. Philip. The first interviews. Quality and safety isn't law enforcement. No arrests, no cameras. There's a process. Small room, coffee, same questions with gentle variations. Do answers line up? They start wide. Charge nurses, RTS, night pharmacist, biomedical tech, the intern who always looks tired. The same phrase repeats. Philip's always first through the door. Assistant nurse manager. He runs, like he hears it before we do. Respiratory. He's there with the backboard before I can grab mine. Biomed. He called at 2:50 a.m. about a hallway panel sweeper. Who even notices that? In healthcare, the hero gets a glow. It comforts people in scary spaces. It also creates blind spots. They bring in Philip, 30, scrubs a bit tight, clean fade, easy smile. Patients like him, staff like him. He sits like someone who's heard good news in rooms like this. It's gentle. Walk us through Monday night. I was stocking linen. Heard the alarm. Ran to 414. We worked the code. You were in 412 at 1:55. Why? Mrs. Cars call light. Bathroom help. Why 409 at 202? He pauses. I do rounds. If I pass a door, I peek in. That's how I was trained. What about the monitor settings? What settings? The alarm limits changed at 1:58. I don't touch those, he says. I'm not allowed to. True, he shouldn't touch them. They let him go. No accusations. Not their lane. Laura adds to her notes. Subject denies alarm access. Audit trail shows access events. Next step, verify user level logging. More numbers, fewer excuses. TV shows chase autopsies. Real life uses timestamps and access logs first. Not every death gets a full autopsy. Families decline. Doctors certify based on charts and judgment. This hospital wants to close a process hole before harm repeats. So, pharmacy next. Automated dispensing cabinets. ADCS track who takes what, when, and for which patient. They're the airport kiosks of meds. The pharmacy manager runs a diversion report, odd usage filter. In the past months, the unit's cabinet shows late-night return to stock events. Back-to-back, same user. Not illegal, but odd. Same user. Philip's badge. Could be cleaning up after codes, returning unopened items. That happens. Laura cross-references returns with code times. Several returns land minutes after codes. not just returns, quick opens, as if something was pulled and put back, or grabbed in a rush and logged wrong. Not proof, but the stack grows. Back to monitor logs. Laura asks Biomed for user-level exports, the who did what, not only the what happened. Every alarm change is a CSV line, date, time, terminal ID, action, and sometimes a username. On 3 nights with codes, one workstation makes unauthorized alarm changes, toggling, silencing, threshold shifts. That workstation is a mobile charting cart used by techs for vitals. The login session belongs to the unit clerk, who, at that exact time, is documented helping a lab runner elsewhere. Who touched the cart? Only cameras might tell. The camera that wasn't meant for this. Most hallways aren't on camera, privacy and cost. But there is a camera at the staff entrance by the supply room, black and white, boring, pointing at a door. 1:56 a.m., the night of Mr. Lane's death. A tech-sized figure leaves the supply room with a small plastic bucket, the kind used for wipes or tubing. The figure pauses next to the mobile charting cart. The bucket goes down, fingers tap the screen. The bucket is picked up. The figure walks off, no face, but a badge lanyard and shoes. Black, clean, reflective stripe on the heel. The assistant nurse manager watches once, quietly. That looks like Philip. This isn't TV, no hall confrontations. Legal is called, then compliance, then the CNO. They decide to watch more and move carefully. If you want the truth to hold, you need to be sure. No leaps, no vibes, just proof. Clearing the red herrings. Staff get spooked. Rumors bloom. Maybe the monitors are faulty. Maybe sensor pads are bad. Maybe the new software patch broke alarms. Maybe the unit is just sicker lately. Quality runs each down. Biomed checks firmware, no issue. Materials checks padlocks, one advisory, but not used here. IT checks the EHR patch. It touched pharmacy, not alarms. Census and acuity? Normal to slightly lower. No seasonal spike. When everything's system looks fine, the absence becomes its own signal. The week of watching. Quiet process changes go live. 2-person cosign for late-night alarm changes. Auto-lock turned on for mobile charting carts. After-hours pharmacy returns need extra confirmation. A unit supervisor stays on the floor past 1 a.m., unannounced. Night 1. Nothing happens. People roll eyes. Maybe it's all spreadsheet paranoia. Night 2, 2:11 a.m. A call light pings at the far end. The assigned nurse is tied up, the first unassigned responder. Philip. He stays about 2 minutes. No charting entered. The room's monitor shows a brief silence. Auto-lock kicks in on the cart. To continue, a user would need a fresh login. He leaves. The primary nurse enters and charts. Patient stable. 2:22 a.m. The primary alarm escalates. Hallway light flashes. Overhead call code blue. The team runs. Philip is there first. Again. They work the code. The patient survives. Quiet relief. While the code runs, the supervisor steps to the desk monitor and pulls the audit log. The screen does not accuse. It lists times 2:11:34, silence toggle. 2:12:02, limits adjusted. 2:22:10 alarm escalation. The cart's auto-log shows use at 2:11 under the clerk session, but the clerk is documented charting in another room at 2:11:07. The only way both are true, someone used an unlocked session they didn't own. In these cases, tiny details carry the case. The conversation, real life, not TV. Morning, conference room. Present, CNO, HR, Quality, Compliance Council. No police, no cameras, table, water, a manila folder with 2 months of printouts. We're reviewing night shift events, the CNO says. We need to go over some records. Page 1, schedule grid. Codes highlighted. Phillips shifts in blue. The overlap looks like plaid. Why were you in these rooms before events? I do rounds. Page 2, door logs. Why scan into unassigned rooms with no charting after? I answer cool lights. I help. Page 3, monitor audit trail. Tell us about these alarm changes. I never touch alarms. I'm not allowed. Page 4, still frame from the staff entrance camera. Bucket, shoes, hand tapping the cart. This is you, correct? He stares a beat too long. Looks like me. Final page. Supervisor's fresh notes. Auto-lock times. Conflicting logins. Why use a workstation under someone else's session? No answer. He tries a small smile that works with anxious families, but not here. I'm always first to respond, he says at last. I know, the CNO says. That's what this is about. They place him on administrative leave pending investigation. Security collects his badge. Quiet exit. After the room goes quiet. No courthouse finale here. This is not about headlines. It's about a system finding a person-sized hole and closing it fast. The hospital self-reports to the state. They open a formal root cause analysis. Families whose loved ones coded on the review nights are notified. The words are careful. We are reviewing events on this date. We will answer questions. Some families want details. Some do not. Inside the hospital, they do what should be done, especially when no one is watching. High-level alarm changes require a unique code every time. No piggyback on unlocked sessions. Mobile carts switch to badge to wake. No open screens in hallways. Pharmacy cabinets deny after-hours returns without a live pharmacist code. Training refresh. Who can touch what? And real enforcement. No rockstar exceptions. Unannounced supervisor rounds between 1 and 3 a.m. A confidential patient safety reporting line opens, anonymous, recorded, investigated. Then something everyone felt but didn't want to say. Code blues drop, not to 0. This is a hospital. But the strange cluster lifts. The state conducts its own review. We won't speculate on outcomes. This is a culture story. We saw it before the worst happened again. Things people said. Some lines stick. Respiratory therapist. I felt bad questioning it. He helped. You don't want to side-eye the guy with the backboard. Turns out not asking was worse. Night nurse, 15 years in. I started doubting myself. Am I missing alarms? Just tired. Now I know my gut was reading a pattern my brain hadn't graphed. Laura, the analyst, in the cafeteria. I didn't catch a villain. I caught a pattern. Villain is our brain trying to tidy a messy truth. Someone saw trust, found gaps, and used them. The system didn't know it was bleeding until the graphs turned red. She sips bad coffee. Build systems that don't need heroes. What about Mr. Lane? Did the audit prove someone caused his collapse? Number. Not without forensic steps the hospital chose not to pursue, for its own reasons and the family's wishes. But this is true. His death triggered a review that likely prevented others. Sometimes, the life you save belongs to a person you'll never meet, because you fix the thing waiting for them. The hero problem. We love heroes. Healthcare has real ones. Nurses who spot a small change and prevent a crash. Techs who unkink a tube in the dark. RTS who fix a vent by touch. That is good. The problem is when the hero idea covers weak controls. He's a rock star. Let him adjust the monitor. She's always first. Give her the override code. Speed feels kind. It also builds back doors. The fix isn't no heroes. The fix is boring and strict. No one changes certain settings without their own login. No one borrows logins. No after-hours returns without a live check. No one gets to be everywhere first without someone asking why and checking the logs. And when someone is always first through the door, high-five them and pull the receipts anyway. For families and staff. If you're a patient or family member, ask, when an alarm goes off, who responds? What's the policy on changing alarm settings? Say, please document that in the chart when a change is made. If something feels off, talk to the charge nurse. Use patient relations to learn processes. Asking is not accusing. If your staff don't let, he just knows what he's doing, replace controls. If your gut says too many codes, it may be seeing a pattern. Speak up, push for auto-lock carts and unique logins for sensitive actions. The slowdown lasts a week, then no one notices. Questioning a process is not attacking a person. It protects your care. What happened to Philip? The hospital's careful statement says, following an internal review of clinical events and system logs, the hospital placed a staff member on administrative leave and implemented additional safeguards to ensure patient safety. We reported our findings to the appropriate authorities and are cooperating fully. We are grateful to team members who raise concerns and to families for their patience and trust. No victory lap. No montage. A hole in a schedule. New policies where old ones failed. A month later, the coffee cup is back on the whiteboard. The night is quiet. Alarms behave. A cooking show murmurs down the hall. At 2 a.m., the hallway feels how it should. Boring. Boring is good in a hospital. Why tell this story? If you're still here, you're the kind of person who doesn't need jump scares. You like the backstage truth, how clipboards and spreadsheets change outcomes quietly. The hero here isn't a cape, it's a graph. A clerk who printed a list, a nurse who said too many, a data analyst who colored boxes until they talked, a supervisor who walked at 2 a.m. without warning, a team that shut a back door and didn't apologize for an extra click. If you work nights, I hope you feel seen. If you've had a loved one under a monitor, I hope you feel a little safer. Not because evil doesn't exist, but because boring, careful, verified process can meet it at the door and say, not here. Closing. 2 thoughts. The fastest responder is not automatically the best caregiver. Speed is a tool. Character is what you do when no one is watching and a cart is unlocked. The people who stopped this didn't try to be heroes. They tried to be honest. They asked plain questions. They printed receipts. They gave the system fewer chances to be fooled. That's what safety looks like. Less romance, more receipts. That closes our first story. Take a breath. Next, we're moving through 5 eerily similar cases. 5 portraits of serial predators and the systems that almost missed them. Watch for the patterns. Story 1. The Manifesto in the Mattress. The guard gave him a pencil because he looked bored, not because he looked dangerous. In Leveson Federal Penitentiary, Boredom was the one thing nobody could contraband. Cal Ransom rolled the cedar yellow pencil between his fingers as if testing the weight of a weapon, then leaned over a stack of loose paper and began with a sentence that could have been an epitaph. I hate you all. Not you personally, you, plural, mankind, governments, churches, reform schools, the men who ran them, and the boys who survived them. Cal's letters bloomed into paragraphs, then into pages that sounded nothing like pleas. He didn't ask for mercy. He didn't claim madness. He wrote like an auditor closing a hateful ledger. He had been born on a busted farm. Father walked out. Mother wore down. At 11, he was shipped to a reform school that called itself a home. Cal called it a basement with straps soaked in brine. In his telling, whatever was human in him curled up there and stopped trying. If you believed him, the school didn't educate. It manufactured resentment and stamped it with a Bible verse. By 15, he was jumping boxcars, drinking from tin cups, and stealing because taking felt better than asking. He learned a magic trick. If you never stayed long enough to be known, no one would notice you go. A different name in each town, a different smile, a different lie. Then a riot of escalation. He broke into a politician's summer house, the fat one with the portrait, and found cash in a desk and a revolver in a shoebox. The cash he used to buy a used sailboat, paint flaking from the rails, a motor that coughed to life only when kicked. The gun he tucked into his waistband like an omen. He called the boat Pilgrim because he was the kind of man who liked words that sounded holy while doing things that weren't. He docked along the East Coast and offered odd jobs to anyone who needed a bunk for a night. Help tie off. I'll pay you in the morning. Morning never came. The harbour police logged disappearances with the time-honoured notes. Transient, drunk, jumped bail, wrong crowd. Cal drifted on, a rumour with a rope. Sometimes he slipped south. Sometimes he slipped farther. Mexico, then a shuddering cargo ship to a coast in Africa where foreigners were above paperwork and nobody asked questions when hired men didn't come back from the bush. In Cal's version, he shot 6 of them just to see whether the world would stop him if he aimed far enough from the courthouse. It didn't. He wrote about arson like some people write about first love. A refinery at night, a ribbon of fire curling up a ladder, the shouts, the sirens, the color of panic. He liked the kind of crime that looked like bad luck on paper. He never took souvenirs. He took satisfaction. If a town called it an accident in the morning edition, he felt affirmed. Arrests came like weather. Petty theft, vagrancy, assault. He learned to bend cell bars with a trick of leverage he'd read in a book and practiced on a bed frame. In one county, he sweet-talked the turnkey, stole his keys during a handshake, and was across the tracks before the man finished his smoke. Each escape reinforced a private theorem. Institutions existed to be mocked. When Leveson finally kept him, it wasn't for violence. It was for burglary with a name attached. He had gotten sloppy and stayed in a city long enough that someone remembered him from a fight. A young guard named Hayes treated him like a person. That wasn't mercy. It was curiosity. Hayes asked Cal to write what he'd done and why. For your conscience, he said, sounding like a man who still believed paper could change people. Cal smirked, then obliged. The pages were viciously articulate. He didn't call his crimes needs. He called them choices that felt like arithmetic. He described assault the way some men describe hunting. It was the only time I felt alive. He described murder with the flatness of a clerk. He was there. Running through it all, a theology of contempt. No God, no devil, just men pretending to be either. He estimated his number at 21, then wrote beneath it, "I could be wrong. I didn't count as carefully as you'd like." He made a joke, then didn't laugh on the page. When the pages reached the prosecutor's desk, there was jubilation followed by grief. Jubilation because here, finally, was a confession. Grief because a confession is not a roadmap. Cal hadn't buried bodies with care. He'd discarded them. He hadn't kept trophies. He'd kept going. For every line in the manifesto that could be verified, 3 could not. He might have invented. He might have embellished. But there was a dead boy found with a rock where a face should be, 30 miles from a bay where Pilgrim was moored that summer. There was a harbour ledger with a cash payment to sea ransom, the week a sunburned sailor vanished. There was a refinery insurance claim a month after Cal had written, "I finally did it." In his last year, he killed a man inside the prison in a fight that wasn't a fight. When offered an appeal, he tilted his head like someone was explaining the game he'd tired of. "Hurry it up," he told the warden before the hanging. "I could have done this myself." What do you do with a man who knew exactly what he was and set it down in ink? A monster born? A boy broken? A citizen who declared war on the word "we"? The guard who brought him paper delivers mail now, older and heavier. Sometimes he thinks about the moment the pencil crossed the first line. He wonders whether giving Cal the means to speak was a mistake. Then he remembers the mothers whose missing sons were drunks on a ledger until the pages turned them back into people. Audience question. When a killer writes the story first, cold, unrepentant and smart, do we treat the manuscript as a tool for justice or as a platform that risks glorifying him? Where's your line? Up next, a man who baked birthday cakes by day and drew a map of bodies by night. The pins were little X's. The plane was small. The woods were big. Story 2. X marks the snow. Anchorage always looks honest in the morning. There's something about the air, clean as a promise, cold enough to keep secrets brittle. Bobby Hale's bakery helped. The glass case crowded with eclairs, the cinnamon rolls rising like small planets. The man himself with a stutter that made sarcasm impossible, and apologies sound sincere. People like Bobby. He had that sheepish competence that makes neighbors trust you with a spare key. He'd moved north and married quiet. He hunted in season and spoke fondly of his father's kneading hands and his mother's patient pies. He did not look like a man who owned a strip of gravel 200 miles west that a two-seater could land on. Cindy didn't look like a woman who could run on frost with one wrist cuffed and the other bleeding where steel had chafed skin raw. She exploded from a hanger like alarm itself. Barefoot, gowned in panic, making a noise too high to be a scream and too low to be a siren. A pickup stopped because men in Alaska stop for things that move wrong. In the ER, under lights that made everything look clinical, she said, "He has a plane, and he has things, and he said no one would miss me." The nurse pressed gauze and pressed call. Detective Mara Kunuk had a desk that made interns think she was messy and lieutenants think she was overworked, which was true. She'd chased kidnaps that ended in relief and murders that ended in protest marches. She kept 2 files open for 3 years with names written in black marker that didn't get smudged because nobody touched them. Women found in gullies or under birch. Bones that didn't line up until dental impressions tried to. Cindy's details lodged in Mara's head like splinters. The mounted bearskin in a basement. The smell of oil. A stutter on the name Bob. Mara had interviewed a Bob once. Hale Bakery Community League. He'd donated cupcakes to a fundraiser for missing women. A detail so sharply ironic it felt like fiction. Which is how true crime keeps hurting. Real people do the things characters only threaten. The first search was tidy and unhelpful. A court order gave Mara and 2 uniforms a walk through Hale's home that felt like trespassing on a postcard. The basement had a chest freezer big enough for a deer and a pegboard of tools hung with equal spacing. Like someone who hated chaos lived there. The only weapon in plain sight was a compound bow. The floor was clean enough to eat off. That was the problem. The tip that broke the ice wasn't a tip. It was a nail. Mara stared at the basement paneling after everyone else had stopped seeing it. 1 row of finishing nails had a head brighter than the rest. When she pried the board up, dust sighed and wood groaned like a throat. She slid her hand into the wall and felt paper. Maps. 3 of them. 2 road charts and a folded aviation map with grease marks where fingers had pushed and unfolded it 100 times. On the aviation chart, small X's lay scattered like a constellation only one astronomer admired. 24. Someone had pressed hard enough to emboss the paper, like wanting to make the marks permanent. Fishing spots, Hale's attorney said later, so quickly you could hear the rehearsals. My client fly fishes. Everyone does here. Everyone doesn't hide maps in walls, Mara said. So flat her partner exhaled like he'd been holding breath for a week. Search teams don't hike, they comb. The first X sat on a ridge beyond a river that braided itself into silver. Cadaver dogs circled, sat, and looked at handlers the way dogs do when they find the truth. They came back with bone that matched the shape of a human's patience. The second X gave a rib. The third, a tooth that made a dentist stoop and whisper, "Oh." The press wanted a villain. They got a man in a borrowed blazer who blinked under flashbulbs like the light physically hurt him. Hale did not confess. He negotiated. He would point to X's in exchange for a sentence measured in years stacked like firewood instead of a needle. The DA stared past him to the mothers behind the glass and did the math that neither extreme wanted. Jurisdictional fights, weather forecasts, the cost of never finding what the map might hold. In the interviews, Hale spoke in 2 registers. In one, the stutter made him look breakable. In the other, the stutter disappeared. When he spoke about the woods, he said he liked the quiet out there. He said people were better when they were small shapes moving through spruce. He said he'd let them run to give them a chance. The court reporter lost her place for a second and had to be reminded to keep typing. He never used the word hunt. He never used the word kill. He said, did it, and it happened. The sort of grammar that can make a courtroom throw up its hands. Mara didn't. She put the map on an easel and tapped X's with a pencil, while families held each other or couldn't hold anything, and media people panned their cameras slow for drama. "We think these are women whose names we know," she said. "We also think these include women whose names we never learned. We're going to change that." The summer of the digs felt like a punishment the state deserved. Teams went out with shovels and came back with trash bags they carried, like they were walking behind small coffins. They found earrings that didn't belong to wives. They found plastic cuffs in a puddle that froze and thawed and froze. They found a ring that a mother recognized by the scratch across the setting from a day when her daughter had dropped a box on a moving day and laughed about adding character. Hale's defense tried to make Cindy small. She was 17, a sex worker, a runaway, a story with edges people decide they can ignore so their mornings feel clean. Mara gave Cindy structure. She got her witness counseling and coffee before depositions, and she ended every meeting with the sentence, "You matter." It sounded like a cliche until Cindy cried because no one had said it out loud in years. The plea came down like cold rain. Howell traded the rest of the map and admissions that closed composite cases for a sentence that outlived him. He never said why, because men like him don't have whys they recognize as reasons. He said words about rejection and anger, and they wouldn't have been missed. A sentence that made the judge look at the state seal instead of the defendant, so he wouldn't say something he'd be quoted for. Anchorage changed because places can, if people are embarrassed enough. The city funded a registry for traveling dancers, and hotel desk managers learned to call an outreach worker when someone didn't check out, instead of letting a housekeeper empty a trash can with a single earring inside it. The police department cross-trained vice and missing persons, so the words lifestyle and choices stopped ending conversations. The bakery closed for a while and reopened with new owners, and a wall of photos of women smiling because memory deserves to smile sometimes. Cindy moved to a town with 1 stoplight and 5 dogs. She works mornings and sleeps well some nights. She answered one letter from a reporter with a sentence that should be posted in every precinct lunchroom. He picked girls he thought would be forgotten. My job is not to let him be right. Hale's map sits in an evidence vault, but copies hang in places where social workers drink too much coffee. Each X has a name next to it, in pencil now, and those pencils get replaced when they dull. If you go to the overlook above the first dig site at the right hour in August, the light goes gold in a way that makes everything look gentler than it was. There are small stacks of stones there now, 1 for each woman they brought home. It's not enough. It shouldn't be. It's what they have. Audience question. Predators gamble on society's indifference to certain victims. What specific policy, funding, protocol, or tech would most quickly collapse that house edge where you live? Next, a city where the neon glows over cardboard beds. A quiet man with a coat 2 sizes too big, and a series of circles drawn around the dead. Story 3. The river takes what it's owed. They called it the Paper City because the mills along the water once printed everything. News, checks, bills, the thin pages of Bibles and phone books. Now the mills were condos with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. And the river that powered a century of ink had a new reputation. It kept secrets. The first time Detective Mara Finn stood on Dockline Promenade at 5 a.m., the fog came in so thick she could taste it. Out on the slow black water, a towboat horn moaned, and the bridge lights blinked amber. Behind her, college banners flapped above bars with chalkboard signs that still advertised last night's drink specials. She zipped her parka and stared at a phone that wasn't supposed to be there. "Third one this semester," Officer Rios said, pointing to the ping plotted on the map. "Same pattern. Friday night. Walk out. Disappear between cameras. Phone pings from midstream for 10 minutes. Then nothing." Mara knelt. The promenade's cameras watched everything except the space between the last lamppost and the shadow of the willow trees. 10 yards where faces turned to static, where a river could swallow footsteps. On paper, it looked like drink, bad choices, cold water. On paper, it looked like an accident. "On paper," Mara murmured, "people die. In real life, they get helped." Rios glanced at her. "Helped? Into a river?" "Helped," she repeated, tasting the word. The missing this time was Ezra Dane, 21, engineering student, joked too loudly, smiled too easily, walked through 3 camera fields at 1:41 a.m., waved at someone off-frame at 1:42, and then the air ate him. His roommate said he texted at 1:54, "Uber's a ghost lol," followed by a photo of the river, black and shining, a speck of bridge light warped like a tear. By 2:03, his phone sat somewhere between the South Pier and the mooring barge, blinking to a mast that couldn't see faces, only coordinates. Then it went black. The campus did what campuses do. Candles, flyers, a vigil in the quad where a freshman cried into a microphone and the dean said resilience, and the student paper asked, again, why the city wouldn't install more cameras. Mara sat with Ezra's mother on a bench above the promenade and let her talk until the words emptied out. Later, in the squad room, she made a list, 5 names in 2 years, all male, all in the same 6-week window between midterms and finals, all last seen between the same 2 bars on Dockline. It didn't make sense as a serial killer story, the TV kind. It wasn't ritual, it wasn't precise, it was sloppy and cruel, and it looked like bad luck. It looked like water. So she went to the river. You learn a city by the places where people don't go during daylight. The underbridge, the backside of the boathouse, where the dockhands clatter oarlocks at dawn and ignore you if you ignore them. The maintenance alley behind the fancy condos, where a janitor smokes next to a grey door that opens into nowhere. Mara learned to time the towboats, to count the pulses of the current around the pylons, to feel the thrum of the turbines through the soles of her boots. She watched people who watched no one, a man in a parka who always leaned on the same railing, another with a stiff gait who never crossed at lights, a woman with a dog that never sniffed. Patterns aren't always what repeats. Sometimes they are holes. The hole in Dockline's camera grid was 10 yards of willow shadow. The city's inspector told her the tree was too historic to cut. The condo board said the camera had been on back order for months. The bar owner shrugged. We've asked. It's the city, you know. At 1:15 a.m. on a raw Friday, Mara stood 2 lampposts up from the willow and watched people pour out of the mahogany fox. Straight couples leaned into cabs. 2 girls argued with happy voices. A man in a ball cap stood with his back to the river, not watching the door, not watching his phone, watching the space between the last lamppost and the willow shadow. He had the air of someone waiting for a bus he knew would come because it always did. When Ezra's roommate stumbled out and waved at nothing, the man's head tilted. The roommate turned right toward the taco truck, and the man in the cap did not move. Mara followed him anyway. He walked to the end of the promenade, checked the dark water as if counting, then crossed to the maintenance alley behind the condos. He had a badge clipped to his belt. Not city, not campus. Private. He knocked on a grey door. It opened from inside and swallowed him. The door was unmarked. Not a bar, not a residence, not public. She buzzed it. No answer. She waited, watching the alley cameras spill their greenish light, and when the grey door opened again, she slipped her boot into the gap. The man in the cap looked down at it and smiled without humour. "Can I help you, detective?" "Let me in," she said. He stepped sideways, a careful dance to block the hallway beyond with his body. "This is a private resident facility." "Which one?" "Condos," he said. "Utilities, boiler, nothing to see." "What's downstairs?" Mara asked. "Foundations," he said. "And upstairs?" He didn't answer. He closed the door. She took her boot back before it broke. She could have gone for a warrant. She could have waited. Instead, she walked to the river because sometimes you can't fight a city's paperwork. You have to listen to its water. At the mooring barge, a ladder climbed down to a maintenance platform slick with algae. The river moved slow enough to look harmless, fast enough to take you 5 yards while you blinked. The platform led to a steel box built into the dock, padlocked and painted city grey. A stenciled label said AUX pump. She shone a light through the slats and saw something she hated. Clean concrete, newer than the rest, and a drain that didn't line up with any official blueprint she'd ever seen. She found the inlet 30 feet away, a mouth in the river wall below the willow line where water eddied differently, where leaves spun inward. She tossed in a stick. It vanished. Rios handed her a file that afternoon. "I pulled the condo permits," he said. 10 years ago when they converted the mill. The mechanical layouts are a mess. But look at this. A variance for separate private pumping to maintain groundwater stability." "Groundwater," Mara repeated, "or something else." "You think they're sucking the river?" Rios asked, wincing at his words. Mara rubbed her eyes. "I think there's a private pump in a public river, and I think someone knows exactly how the current changes when it kicks on. If you want a body to go under a camera, you push him here. If you want a phone to drift before it dies, you wait until the pump cycles and toss it in." "Who's you?" Rios asked. "Someone who works here. Someone who knows the cycles." They put a BOLO on the man in the cap and came up with a name. Grant Mullen, 43, facility tech for the Dockline Residences, former mill worker, no priors, divorce, son out of state, paid on time, taxes fine. The kind of man who lived in the spaces between official things because that's where his job always was. Mara didn't arrest him. She applied pressure elsewhere. City inspectors at his door, letters to the board, a quiet rumour to a reporter who liked to ask how much a condo association would spend to keep old secrets buried under new hardwood. By the time the inspection date landed, The promenade had another missing boy. Same cameras, same fog, same hole under the willow. This time, the roommate said, he waved at someone. A maintenance guy. I think he said something like, "Hey man, I remember you." "From where?" Mara asked. "From move-in day, maybe. He helped carry our couch." Grant Mullen opened the grey door for the inspectors with polite boredom. He showed them the boilers, the chilled water, the beautifully balanced pumps. He stood beside Mara when they pried up the lid on the auxiliary pump and peered into the clean square of concrete and pipes. "Flood control," he said. "For the river?" Mara asked. "For the garages," he said. "What about the intake pipe behind the willow?" Grant blinked. "What about it? Who runs it?" He spread his hands. "Ask the city." "Better question," Mara said softly. "When does it run?" He smiled. "When it needs to." She could have snapped cuffs right then. It would have felt good. Cinematic. It also would have failed. She didn't want an arrest that made the condo board a villain and turned Grant into a martyr. She wanted a confession even a river couldn't scrub. So she said, "Walk with me." They stepped out onto the promenade into a fog so thick the bridge was only 4 or 5 lights floating in a blank sky. She stopped at the willow's shadow. "Right here," she said. "This is the spot you like." He didn't answer. "Not to kill," she said quickly. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying routine. The same way a mill worker knows when machines will sing. A maintenance man knows when the river will pull." Grant's face didn't move. For a second, Mara thought she was wrong. Then he said something so quiet she almost missed it. "You can hear it," he said, "when it's about to turn." "The pump." "The water," he said. "The way it talks when there's pressure built up, when it wants to go." "Ezra Dane," Mara said. "You were here." Grant looked at the river. "I see a lot of kids make bad choices," he said. "I see them stand right on this edge and tell themselves they're safe because the city built a railing." "And you help them," Mara said. He didn't flinch. He didn't nod. He only said, "I keep things running." "Like the river," she said. "Like the city," he said. "You think it doesn't take maintenance to keep a place from drowning? Ask your budget people. Ask your inspectors. They want dry basements and pretty promenades. They want their paper city story. You know what stories are made of? Paper mills, pumps, people like me." "And bodies," Mara said. He met her eyes. "The river takes what is owed," he said simply. The confession, if it was one, didn't fit in any box. It didn't describe hands on shoulders or a push in the dark. It described a philosophy. It described a man who believed he wasn't hurting anyone because the river was going to ask for blood with or without him. That's not proof. It's a poem. Prosecutors don't take poems to trial. So Mara took something else. She filed a safety injunction to shutter the private pump until the city could certify its intake. The condo board screamed. The newspapers loved it. The promenade cameras were replaced in a week. The willow got trimmed because history mattered less when donors complained. And on the third Friday after Ezra's phone blinked from midstream, Mara stood in the fog again and listened for the water to talk. It didn't. By 2 a.m., The only thing moving was a towboat and a raccoon with a French fry. By 2:30, a group of seniors sang a terrible song and stumbled into a rideshare. By 3, the river was flat as a lie. No one disappeared. No phone pinged from midstream. A week later, Ezra's body surfaced 60 miles downriver and a bend where driftwood collects. There were no marks, no evidence, just lungs, water, and time. An accident, the report said. The coroner used phrases like post-mortem interval and immersion. The family buried their son. The dean sent an email about counseling. Mara watched Grant pack a cardboard box in his tiny office under the condos. The board had cut him loose until the legal dust settles, and he accepted it the way a man who works in maintenance learns to accept all weather. "You won't stop it," he said conversationally, as if discussing a leak. "You cut the intake and the current changes. The river finds another seam in the city. Someone else listens for the moment when the edge between safe and gone sounds like a note only they can hear. That's what people do. We listen for edges." She wanted to say something noble. She wanted to save him or damn him with words that would make a river behave. Instead, she said, "Don't come back to the promenade." He nodded, noted. He walked out into a fog so thin you could see the bridge lights clearly. Spring came. The students graduated. The city cut a ribbon on a new camera with a mayor who said partnership a lot. People told each other the story of how detectives solved the river disappearances with paperwork, not guns. They liked that story. The paper city wrote it down. But sometimes, at 1:42 a.m., a man still walked out of a bar and turned left toward the taxi stand, and the cameras caught him safely getting into a car, and everything ended the way it was supposed to. Other times, a phone pinged from the middle of the river. Not here, not dockline, upstream, downstream. The river takes what it's owed, people said. They said it quietly. They didn't say it near the willow. Question for you. If you were Mara, would you rather slam cuffs on a guy you can't quite prove, or change the city so the pattern starves? Which one feels like justice to you? Story 4 starts in 5 seconds. Ready? Story 4. Vacancy 1313. Hook first. A 911 call comes from room 1313 of the Bellwether Hotel. The dispatcher tries to log it, but the Bellwether has only 12 floors. This hotel knew how to rot beautifully. The lobby still wore its scarred marble like a trophy, and the chandelier held so much dust it looked frosted. The elevators, however, were mean. When they opened, they exhaled a smell like wet carpet and old perfume, and the mirrored panels made you see yourself 10 times, present, past, mistakes. That was the Bellwether's trick. It made you see yourself. Jules Hart checked in on a Sunday night with 2 suitcases and a face her viewers knew. She hosted a late-night cable show about haunted places and historical crimes. A sincere traveler in a genre full of jump scares. The Bellwether wasn't on her schedule. It was a detour because a woman named Dolores had emailed her 2 weeks earlier with the kind of subject line you don't ignore. "My sister called me from a floor that doesn't exist." Jules sat on the edge of the lobby sofa while the night clerk printed out the waiver you sign when a hotel knows its elevators stick and its windows whistle in the wind. "We're renovating," he said. You've been renovating since 1998, Jules said gently. He smiled like it wasn't his fault. What's the show called again? Crossing Midnight, she said. We're not filming. I'm just here to look. We get a lot of lookers, he said. He slid a key card across the marble. You're in 912. The good elevator is on the right. The good elevator, she asked. The one that usually stops where you ask it to, he said. At 1:07 a.m., when hotel carpets leaned toward ghost stories, Jules set her phone to record and clicked play on the 911 audio Dolores had sent. Dispatcher, 911. What's your emergency? Female caller, breathless. I am in room 1313. He has a key. Dispatcher. Mom, can you confirm your location? Caller. The bellwether. I think he works here. Dispatcher. Mom, the bellwether has 12 floors. Caller. He said the elevator pretends. Please, he's coming. A metallic bang. The line goes dead. Dolores's email said her sister Carmen had disappeared 2 years earlier while traveling for a regional real estate convention. The cops shrugged at first, then shrugged harder when they found credit card use one state over. But Dolores didn't shrug. She got the 911 audio through a friend, then listened to it every night like a prayer. She didn't believe Carmen left. She believed the elevator pretended. Jules took the good elevator to 12 and watched the numbers climb. When the door slid open, she stepped into a hallway that smelled like old ice machines. The carpet was a pattern of diamonds, worn flat. The ceiling tiles sagged gently, like people who work too many double shifts. At the far end of the corridor, a service door stood ajar. She walked to it, recording. Inside, a short flight of stairs rose to a locked metal door with a stenciled warning, maintenance only. She put her ear to the metal and heard humming. Not electrical, musical. Someone singing under their breath, a rhythm you use when counting. She went back down and knocked on 1209. A housekeeper in scrubs cracked it. Yes. Jules smiled. I'm looking for the 13th floor. The woman's mouth twitched. Aren't we all? The elevator pretends, Jules said softly. Something like fear darted behind the woman's eyes and disappeared. We don't talk about that, she said, and shut the door. At 2:18 a.m., the elevator that wasn't good juddered to a stop and sighed. The buttons glowed 1 through 12. No hidden trick, no extra keyhole labeled 13. But there was a place where button 15 should have been if this were a different building. A smooth piece of plastic that looked like every other part of the panel, but felt subtly wrong under Jules's fingertip. Colder, newer. She pressed it. The elevator didn't move. It only made a sound like a small decision happening. Then the panel lights dimmed and came back, and the number over the door went blank. The cab moved, not up, not down, sideways. It felt like being pulled up under your ribs by a hand that didn't know it was holding you. When the doors opened, the hallway lights hummed at a different pitch. The carpet pattern had changed from diamonds to L shapes, woven into a maze you could get lost in if you let your eyes wander. The air smelled like fresh paint and something metallic. A black plaque said 1301 to 1316. Jules stood very still and thought, this is how people disappear. They follow something they think will save them. An email, a rumor, a sister's voice. And then a door opens that shouldn't. They step in. They don't step back. She stepped in. Room 1309's door had a nick in the wood, as if someone tried to pry it open with a coin. 1311's peephole was stuffed with tissue. 1313 didn't look special. It looked like a door. She put her ear to it and heard air moving in an enclosed space, and under that, a sound she didn't like. A soft scrape, like something plastic dragging across carpet. She knocked. Silence. She knocked again, lightly. Footsteps, not to the door. Away from it, into the room, toward the far wall, then back with something different in their rhythm. The sound of a person moving while carrying an object with care. The lock turned once. The door chain stayed in place. The door opened 2 inches. A man's face appeared, pale and round and damp, as if he'd fallen asleep in a sauna. He wore a maintenance polo with a bellwether logo sewn crooked on the chest. "We're closed," he said. "For what?" Jules asked. "Renovations," he said. His eyes flicked to her phone. No filming. "I'm not filming," she lied. "I got off on the wrong floor." "There is no 13th floor," he said. "Right," she said. "Exactly." He hesitated. That was how the bellwether caught people. It presented you with an absurdity so bland you kept talking just to hear yourself again. "I won't tell if you won't," she said. He considered, then shut the door 2 inches, unhooked the chain, and opened it 6. The room smelled like orange cleaner and something copper sweet that made Jules want to sit down. He stepped aside to block her view, and she saw, over his shoulder, a roll of thick plastic sheeting and a heap of objects on the bed under a floral spread. A stack of license lanyards, a scatter of cheap keychains, a hairbrush, a silver ring on a hotel notepad. "Working late?" she asked, voice steady. He smiled. "Always." "What's your name?" she asked. "Brett," he said. "How long have you been working the 13th floor that doesn't exist, Brett?" His eyes didn't change. "Long enough to know when the elevator pretends." "Carmen," she said. "Does that name mean anything to you?" His gaze flicked to the bed. One quick, traitorous glance that showed Jules a hotel card embossed with a name, Seemarin. Then his smile came back. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. "That makes 2 of us," Jules said. She heard it then, under the hum, under the hotel's tired breath, the tiniest sound a person can make when they are trying very hard to make no sound at all. A breath held too long in someone else's room. "Is someone here?" Jules asked, leaning to see past him. He stepped forward to block her view. The door touched her sleeve. "We're closed," he said again. Jules did not reach for the chain. She did not push. She did the thing that keeps you alive in the building that eats you if you challenge it. She smiled, nodded like she was the one making a mistake, and took 2 steps backward. "Of course, sorry." He closed the door. The lock turned once. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding and walked, not ran, to the elevator. It came quickly. The panel had no 13. She pressed 12. It took her to 9. She rode to the lobby and walked straight out into the street where the air didn't hum. and called 911 from the curb. "Room 1313, the dispatcher repeated, bored and curious at once. "Yes," Jules said, "and send more than one unit. He has a key. He also has trophies." "Ma'am, please remain on the line," the dispatcher said dutifully. "We're contacting the property." When the patrol car rolled up, the night clerk paled and said, "There is no "Show us the maintenance stair," Jules said. He hesitated just long enough to tell her everything she needed to know. Then he led them to the service door at the end of the 12th floor corridor and up the short flight to the locked metal door. The officer knocked. No answer. He looked at the clerk. "Key." The clerk fumbled a ring and opened the door into a hall that looked like the rest, but wrong. Same carpet pattern as 12, but newer. Same wallpaper, but seam shifted, like the hotel had pressed a copy of it itself out of stale dough. The plaque said 1301 to 1316. The clerk swallowed and said, "I never come up here." "Who does?" Jules asked. "Maintenance," he said. "Brett sometimes." They walked to 1313. The door looked like a door because that's what predators do. They make everything look like everything else. The officer knocked. "Police." Silence. He knocked again. "Maintenance." The lock turned. The door swung inward. The room was empty and politely at rest. Bedspread smoothed. Curtains closed. A tray on the dresser with a domed lid that said "Bellwether Room Service" in old script. No plastic roll. No heap of lives. No man named Brett. But behind the bathroom door, under the sink, taped to the plywood back with blue painter's tape, a handful of room key sleeves rustled when the AC kicked on. Names in ballpoint ink, initials, dates. "Where is he?" the officer asked. "Everywhere," Jules said. "Rooms get cloned, floors get pretended. People who know hotels know how to be ghosts." They found more in 1311, more in 1307, a ring of keys in 1303, a nest of hotel pens in the ceiling tile above 1315. By the time the second patrol unit rolled up, the bellwether had quietly unfolded its 13th floor like a guilty letter. It had always been here, in the seam between city permits and hotel budget lines, in the complacent place where an elevator panel's absence is as good as a locked door. They found Brett at 3:40 a.m., not on 13, but standing at the vending machine on 9, punching a 5 for chips with the calm of a man buying a soda. Jules watched him take a step back, wait for the bag to fall, then look up at her like they'd shared a cab to a funeral. "You called them," he said. "You called first," she said, 2 years ago. He looked genuinely puzzled. "Did I?" "Carmen," Jules said. "Room 1313. Something in his face tightened, then loosened as if a real memory tried to surface and a practice story drowned it. "I keep the floors that don't exist from collapsing," he said mildly. "I keep guests from seeing things they shouldn't." "And when a guest calls for help from a floor that doesn't exist?" Jules asked. He blinked. Then it didn't happen. The bellwether's 13th floor closed a month later. The building put out a statement about safety and compliance. The night clerk found a job at a chain hotel with better lighting. Jules aired an episode that didn't name the city or the property. Dolores watched it in her living room and wept and thanked Jules, and also didn't forgive her because a show is not a sister. A year after that, a demolition crew tore out the service stair and the locked door and the entire hall that pretended not to exist. The elevator panels stayed the same. No 13. But sometimes, if you rode it late and pressed the smooth place where a button could be, it hummed in a way that made your ribs feel like an unlocked door. Question for you: would you have stepped into 1313? Or would you have walked away and lived with the not knowing? Which one is braver? And which one is safe? Story 5 starts in 5 seconds. It's called Clean Hands. Story 5. Clean Hands. Cold open. A beloved philanthropist cuts the ribbon on a new children's wing, while 2 miles away, a storage unit leaks something that smells like bleach. His foundation slogan is painted on both doors: Clean hands, clean future. When the city wants a hero, it makes one. It takes a person with a talent for smiling and a tolerance for small talk and drapes them with words like visionary and steward. It prints their face on billboards. It gives them a key shaped like a skyline. And if you're not careful, it lets that hero do anything they want, because heroes save cities, and cities are very tired. Nathaniel Wilde didn't look like a villain or a savior. He looked like a dentist from an upscale suburb. Silvering hair, careful shoulders. A suit that looked expensive because it wasn't expensive at all. It was perfect. His foundation, Clean Hands, started as a crisis response non-profit that put hand-washing stations on corners during an outbreak, then kept going when the cameras left. Modular sinks outside shelters, hygiene kits in schools, portable showers that rolled into vacant lots when heat made humans smell like desperation and dignity. Journalists loved him. Donors loved him. The city council named a day after him. Detective Kira Lott didn't love him. She didn't hate him. She didn't know him, and that was the point. She only knew the smell that rolled out of Storage Max Unit B 117 when the manager pried the lock with a bolt cutter because the account had lapsed. It wasn't the sweetish reek of rot. It was chemical. It was clean in a way that made you feel less clean. Inside the unit, 4 stainless steel tables like you'd find in a hospital, 3 industrial-sized bottles of bleach, a wet vac, a stack of folded tarps, and a rolling rack hung with coveralls in sizes S to XL. On a shelf, laminated placards with the Clean Hands logo. On the floor, a dry line of whitish residue that traced a neat rectangle like tape marks on a stage. Who rented this? Kira asked. The manager pointed at the contract. Shell Company. But the card, Clean Hands Foundation. Kira took pictures and made a quiet call. The city loved Clean Hands. If this was nothing, no one needed to know. If it wasn't... You think he's washing money? Her captain asked, trying for a joke and missing. I think he's washing something, she said. Wilde met her in a glass conference room with a view of the Foundation's warehouse, where a dozen workers were packing hygiene kits. He glowed with a kind of cleanliness you can't fake. We rent storage all over the city, he said. We stage equipment for deployments, bleach, tarps. That's what response looks like. And the stainless tables? Kira asked. He smiled, patient. We do pop-up wound care clinics, not medical, first aid. You'd be amazed how many people will come for a band-aid and leave with a case manager. The story fit. It fit so well it almost creaked. Kira walked the warehouse, counted sinks, asked names. Everyone said Mr. Wilde worked harder than any donor they'd ever met. He stayed late. He drove supply trucks himself. He showed up when no one else did. He took pictures only when it helped the mission. 3 days later, a sanitation crew called in a code 2 for a hazmat concern at the edge of the Mill Creek encampment. Kira pulled up to find a clean hands shower trailer parked crooked, the hose dribbling. A volunteer named Jess paced with a clipboard. "We shut it down when the water went cloudy," she said. "Cloudy how?" Kira asked. "Like someone dumped a bottle of sanitizer into the tank," Jess said. "Except we don't use that stuff in the lines. It messes up the filtration. Mr. Wilde said the city changed the water supply and not to worry." "Where is Mr. Wilde?" Kira asked. "Donor lunch," Jess said. "He said to move the trailer to the north lot and flush it." "Don't move anything," Kira said. She crawled under the trailer with a flashlight and found a hairline crack in the grey water tank patched with tape. The tape had peeled. The leak had turned the ground into a chalky paste that looked like melted soap, but smelled like a hospital supply closet. "Bleach?" Rios asked, crouching beside her. "That's not bleach," Kira said. "It's too sweet." They traced the trailer's route for the past month and mapped it against a cluster of deaths that had whispered through the corners of Kira's caseload like mice. 5 people living rough, all found within a few blocks of where the trailer had parked. CODs varied: overdose, exposure, natural. None screamed homicide because death doesn't scream when it sits down quietly in a place the city doesn't see. Patterns again, or holes. Kira pulled autopsy tog screens. 3 of the 5 showed trace amounts of chlorhexidine, an antiseptic used in surgical scrubs and deep clean disinfectants. Tiny amounts, not enough to kill anyone. Except, what if someone with compromised skin integrity, infections, wounds, got doused with solution at concentrations meant for countertops, not people? She thought of the stainless tables, the tarps, the slogan, "Clean hands, clean future." "Wilde's not stupid," her captain said when she pitched a warrant. "If he's sloppy with chemicals, it's negligence at worst." "Negligence kills people," Kira snapped. "Prove it," he said. She went back to Storage Max in the rain and stood in Unit B117 with her hands in her coat pockets, listening to the quiet hum of a building that held some people's Christmas decorations and other people's entire lives. She pictured a pop-up clinic in this exact rectangle, tarps taped to the floor to catch drips, tables lined with wound wash and good intentions. She pictured a donor photo in a newsletter and a man who liked to be needed a little too much. Wilde called her the next morning as if she were a friend. "We're deploying to the south lot at noon. I'd love to show you how we work." "Donor lunch cancelled?" she asked. He laughed. "Donors love being useful." She arrived to find the trailer gleaming, hose lines neatly coiled. Wilde wore jeans and a clean hands hoodie. He gave a small tour for a group of people who smelled like office coffee. "Every kit is a conversation starter," he said. "A way to build trust." "Trust you to do what?" Kira asked. "To show up," he said warmly. "Even when the cameras aren't here." "Especially then," he said. He was good. He was so good it made her angry because people needed sinks and someone who said their names on purpose. He was a story the city wanted to be true. She followed the hose line to the grey water tank and saw the tape patch had been replaced with a proper fix. The leak had stopped. The smell hadn't. She set a sample jar under the outflow and watched water drip. Clear, then faintly cloudy, then clear again as the pump cycled. "Something in your lines," she said conversationally. "Soap," he said. "Not the kind you use on hands," she said. His eyes were kind and blank. "I leave that to my ops team." "Storage Unit B117, she said softly. "You or ops?" "A beat. We lease dozens of units." "What do you do on those tables?" she asked. "Clean the future," he said, and smiled because that line always worked. She could have made a scene. She didn't. She let the donors leave with warm feelings and let the trailer rumble off to its next position. Then she did something that felt useless and turned out to be a lever. She called a nurse who ran a street medicine team and asked her to teach a class. 2 days later, in a community center that smelled like dust and hope, 30 volunteers who wore clean hands t-shirts sat in folding chairs while a woman named Tasha held up a bottle of chlorhexidine and said, "This is not for skin at this dilution. This is for countertops. If you use this in the shower line because it makes donors feel like we're blasting germs, you will burn people." A young volunteer raised a hand shaky. Mr. Wilde said, "Mr. Wilde is not a nurse," Tasha said calmly, "and you need to stop worshipping men with clipboards." The clipboards flushed. A few people left. Most didn't. They wanted to do it right. They had been waiting for permission to say out loud the thing their instincts already knew. Wilde called Kira that night. His voice was cooler. "You're undermining my work." "I'm saving it," she said. "You can either learn or get sued." "You have no idea how hard this is," he said. And there it was, the strain in the voice of a man who believed the city would die without him. "You're right," she said. "I don't know what it's like to be on a stage while my volunteers burn people with the wrong chemical because I didn't train them." Silence. Then, "We need to meet." She met him at the warehouse after closing. The lights made the place look like a clean garage. He stood with his back to a pallet of boxed soaps and stared at the big printed mission statement on the wall. "You think I'm a monster," he said softly. "I think you like being necessary," she said. "I am necessary," he said with unbearable sincerity. "When the city closes showers, when shelters overflow, when public health says it's out of our hands, it's in my hands." "Clean hands," she said. He closed his eyes. "I started this because no one else would. And then donors showed up. Do you know what donors like? Sparkle, before and after. They don't like slow, patient cleaning. They like a hose and a chemical that smells like something is dying. I gave them a smell." "And people got hurt," she said. He opened his eyes. "I can fix it," he said. "I can fix anything." "Nathaniel," she said, and used his first name not to be kind but to be exact. "What happened in Unit B117? He took a breath. "We did a pop-up wound clinic during the storm," he said. "The shelters were turning people away because of wet floors and liability. I couldn't let them get infected. We laid tarps. We cleaned feet. We used what we had. We scaled. Scaled, she repeated. I thought if we made it look professional, it would become professional, he said. If we had tables, it would turn into a clinic. If we had bleach, it would disinfect anything we did wrong. And the bodies, she said gently. The 5 deaths near your sides. He flinched. Coroner said exposure. Coroner said a lot of things. He sagged. I didn't kill anyone. I didn't say you did, she said. I'm saying you wanted to be a savior so badly that you didn't notice when you turned washing into damage. He stared at her like she'd turned into a wall he couldn't find a key for. What do you want? Shut the unit, she said. Shut the 13th floor of your foundation. Get licensed clinicians. Train your people. Admit in writing that you used an agent at the wrong dilution and pay for wound care for those you burned. And if you ever tape a tarp to a storage unit floor again, I will find the code section that makes it a crime and I will carve it on your door. He smiled then, small and bitter. You think that will save anyone? I think it will keep you from making more holes, she said. He did it, not because he was noble, because the donors called, because the nurse's training turned into a story, because the word negligence began to whisper near the foundation's name. He shut B117. He hired clinicians. He dulled the sparkle. The city muttered and moved on, because cities need their heroes, even when they are scuffed. Months later, in a quiet moment at a pop-up that smelled like real soap and not death, the young volunteer who'd raised her shaky hand handed Kira a folded piece of paper. Inside, a photo of a man whose feet were clean and bandaged, looking into a camera like someone had said his name gently. We started writing down the names, the volunteer said, so they can't be holes. Kira nodded and tucked the paper into her pocket like a receipt for the only currency that matters. Question for you. In a city that runs on good PR, would you take down a beloved foundation to stop a quiet harm? Or try to reform it from the inside and risk being used for optics? Where's your line? We've just walked through 5 cases with names, faces, and mostly endings, but not every city gets that closure. For our final story, we step into the dark on purpose. A phantom who killed, adapted, and then vanished. No arrest, no body, no confession. If you're ready for a mystery that refuses to end, stay with me. The last story begins now. The city was not special. It had a river, a bridge, and long blocks of brick row houses that caught late sun like old coins. There were corner stores with neon, bus stops with old flyers, and alleys that smelled like rain and dust. People had their roots and their habits. They trusted the routine because routine keeps the day moving. That is how it began. The first victim in the news was the girl by the tracks, because names were protected and families asked for privacy. She was 19, a student, fast walker, headphones in her pocket, not her ears. She left the library, turned onto a service road by the rail yard, and did not reach home. There were no clear marks at first glance. The scene looked tidy the way evil sometimes looks when it wants to hide, but the harm was there, close and controlled. No camera saw a face. No neighbor heard a fight. Whoever did this knew how to move fast, how to get close, and how to leave almost nothing behind. The second was a taxi driver found in his car with the engine still warm and the meter still running. A plastic rosary was tangled around the gear shift. There were signs of restraint, the faint line of a zip tie on the wrist like a cruel bracelet. The end was clean again, like a signature written in invisible ink. The third was a nurse who walked home after a late shift. She was strong, and she fought. Scuffs on the sidewalk showed heels dragging for leverage. There was a smear of blood on a low brick wall, hers mostly, not all. The part that was not hers could not be matched to anyone in the system. In a city of hundreds of thousands, a partial trace might as well be smoke. Patterns rose slowly, like oil after rain. The scene sat near transit corridors, under bridges, beside stadium lots, or at the edges of busy places where a single cry would vanish into engine noise. The killer picked victims who trusted short walks, who moved through patches of light and shadow like everyone else. He took small things that did not seem valuable. One earring, a bus pass, a faded bare keychain. They were not trophies in the loud way movies describe. They were quiet marks that said, "I was here." I own this hour now. As fear grew, so did his boldness. After the fourth victim, a bartender locking the side door after last call. People lined up to buy pepper spray and pocket alarms. The mayor added patrols and lights. Parents texted grown children, "Call me when you get home," like when they were 12. The killer adapted faster than the city. He stopped haunting empty lots and moved toward places where there were people, but not attention. A construction site at dawn, a stadium lot after a game, a dim path behind a strip of shops where the trash pickup and the bus stop shared a patch of shadow. He hunted the gaps, the 10 seconds you look down at your phone, the 3 steps where the sidewalk bends behind a hedge. He seemed to know how long a camera blinked and how far a streetlight reached. The task force formed and ran on coffee, instincts, and the need to be right for once before someone else died. Chief Sloan stood in front of cameras with a jaw like a padlock. Detective Mara Voss took the late shifts and did not go home when the shift ended. Lieutenant Halim wore the same tie for every press conference like armor. He did not want to switch out. They used every tool they could get. They pulled footage from storefronts and doorbells. They scraped old cases for echoes. They pushed the lab, and the lab pushed back with physics and time. Blood needs processing. Fibers do not grow mouths on command. Everyone wanted answers in an hour, and truth did not live on that clock. They tried to map his taste. The victims did not share age, job, or look, but they shared predictable movement through overlapping zones. There was always nearby motion, trucks, trains, crowds, and always a path to leave fast. Forensics found almost nothings that felt like almost somethings. A fine white dust that might be plaster or drywall compound. A faint chlorine smell that clung to one officer's jacket after a scene. A cut zip tie with a knot that looked machine tight. Ideas formed around those crumbs. Maybe he was a contractor who used empty buildings and knew how to wear the city's skeleton like a coat. Maybe he was a cleaner with keys and bleach, and a habit of leaving surfaces that never talk. Maybe he lived near the water and used it as a sink. The police put up billboards that said, "Call if you see this, and call if you heard that, and call if you know someone who changed." Calls poured in, hot with anger and fear. Ex-boyfriends with grudges became names in a column. a man who walked his dog at strange hours became a line in a file. 100 men were the phantom for 10 minutes each, and then went back to being regular problems or no problem at all. The nickname stuck because names make fear easier to say out loud. The Phantom. Reports used it. People repeated it. The killer accepted it by continuing to make it fit. There were near misses that still make breath catch when they are retold. One night, a patrol car rolled past a warehouse and saw a dark van with the engine warm. The officer noticed, circled the block, and came back to an empty space and a bottle cap still warm where a hand had been. Another time, a city camera caught a figure crossing the river at 3:07 a.m. with a duffel that barely swung. The same camera saw the same figure coming back minutes later with a slack bag that looked lighter. Divers went into the river after sunrise and brought up junk with stories. Old tires, a broken safe, the bones of a bicycle, but nothing that carried a human name. Voss later said she felt him once in a stairwell after a shelter alarm tripped. She moved with her light up and her gun down, and the stairs smelled like wet stone, and a cleaner you use when you're trying to erase a smell. A cold draft touched her face. The roof was empty. The city was a flat map of windows, and nothing waved back. Pressure rose the way summer heat does, slow then suddenly everywhere. The mayor promised more. The union asked for patience. Families wanted something other than patience. They wanted a name and a face and a reason to sleep for more than an hour. A big clue almost broke the case. A pawn shop owner called to say a man had sold a handful of small items in a hurry. One earring, a bus pass, a faded bear keychain. He had copied the seller's ID as the law requires. The ID was perfect, which made it suspicious. The laminate was crisp. The edges were clean. The number belonged to no one the system could see. The money trail ended at a prepaid card that turned into air. They tried a bait operation. Officers walked repeat routes dressed like likely targets. They waited for the Phantom to repeat himself. He did not. He changed times. He changed streets. He passed one officer so close she felt a pocket of cold air, and he kept going like he had practiced the walk in a mirror. Then, without a warning that anyone could read, it stopped. 2 weeks passed. 3. A full month moved through the city like a held breath. The killings had followed a rhythm for 11 months and 11 days. Now, nothing. Nobody by the tracks. No taxi that did not reach its next street. No nurse who failed to arrive for a shift. It was the kind of quiet that feels like the space before a thunderclap. The task force called it the quiet and did not trust it. They checked hospital logs for unidentified remains, arrests in other counties, bookings with strange notes. They scanned obituaries for a man who did not belong. They asked labs about backlogs and heard the same answer. We are working. We do not have it yet. They walked old scenes to see if memory would give them a new angle. It did not. 3 months became 6, and the task force met less and in smaller rooms. Other crimes demanded beds and hours and attention. Resources drifted with the weather of public fear. A vanishing leaves a different scar than a capture. A captured killer becomes a file, a sentence, and an end date. A vanished killer becomes a story that never knows how to finish. People kept talking, and the talk grew into theories because human brains hate a blank space. One theory said he died. Maybe he pushed too far and picked a fence line with a gun behind it. Maybe he slipped and broke on concrete by the service road. Maybe he drowned in the same river he used as a dumping ground, and the water kept the secret in the silt. Maybe it was simpler. A heart that lived too long in adrenaline missed a beat it could not get back. Another theory said he was arrested for something smaller in some other jurisdiction, booked under another name, and is now watching a clock on a wall for a crime that is not the worst thing he did. A third said he felt the hook and cut the line himself. He saw the bait and the extra cameras and the nervous streets and stepped away. He cold-turkeyed a need that most people cannot imagine and turned it into a smaller thing he could keep hidden. He ran at night. He kept his car spotless. He learned to smile with his eyes. A fourth theory said he planned his exit from the start. He used cash, cleaned out a storage unit in 30 minutes, rode a ferry, crossed a border, and started again with paper that holds no past. Every theory had holes you could drive a truck through. There was no body. There was no confession. There was no solid piece of proof that could live in a courtroom. There was only the quiet, and then the slow drag of time. Detective Voss kept a private box under her desk with copies of the small things he had taken. The earring, the bus pass, the bear keychain. Only photos, not originals. She did not tell anyone she held them sometimes like worry beads. Almost a year into the quiet, she received an unsigned note with no words. Just a scrap of white plastic, the tiny cut end of a zip tie. Was it him, or a cruel fan of the myth? The lab said it was plastic like any other plastic. It could have come from a toy. It could have come from a terrible night. It would never tell which. The city kept moving because that is what cities do, but it didn't move the same way. Families tried to build lives around holes. A mother kept her daughter's room ready, as if the girl might come home late, but safe this time. She pressed her face into a shirt and would not wash it. A taxi driver's son learned to drive the same car and scrubbed the seatbelt until the edges went pale. He wore the rosary and told himself that some disappearances were brave, some were cowardly, and some were only possible because the world looked away at the wrong second. The nurse's sister moved apartments and then cities. Every place had one corner that felt wrong, and one man who stood a step too close and made her turn to check the distance. Some days she wanted the phantom to be alive so he could hurt the way he hurt others. Some days she wanted him dead so her head could rest. The city changed rules and some changes stayed. More lights went up. More cameras could see in the dark a little better than eyes. Bars put panic buttons under the counter. Taxi companies added cameras that blinked a small blue dot. Hospitals arranged escorts for late shifts. Experts on television talked about the few killers who stop. Some get sick or old. Some find new rituals that take the edge off. Some marry and perform normal life like a long, careful play. People do not like this theory because it asks them to imagine a monster living in a house with curtains and grass that gets cut on Saturdays. But the theory stayed because it fit like a boring shoe. More theories grew vines. A new identity is easier than it should be. A careful person can build a life from data if he takes time and knows which cracks to press. A foreign escape is simple enough with cash, a backpack, and a passport that passes a quick look. He could be the quiet worker in a hostel lobby who remembers everyone's name and gives no one his own. He could be the steady man on a job site who never misses a shift and never makes a friend. The most unsettling theory said he did not need to leave or change anything big. He might have simply stopped. He might buy milk and nod at neighbours and throw a ball for a dog with the same measured arm he used for other tasks. He might sleep most nights. He might wake sometimes with a hand tight on the sheet. He might breathe until the urge turns into dust, and then get up and make coffee. The police did not mark the file closed because it was not. They called it cold. They reopened it when a new grant arrived, or a new technology promised a new kind of look. Every few years, a younger detective pulled the box and thought maybe the old pattern hid a new pattern that only new eyes could see. Databases changed. The old partials ran through new nets. Matches came up with small fish that had nothing to do with the river they wanted. Phone numbers in the file had new owners who said, "Wrong person," or old owners who said, "I can't talk about that anymore." The file got heavier with copies and lighter with hope, and then heavy again when a rumor made the rounds. An anonymous tip about a storage unit out by the highway. A call about a man who cried in his sleep in a boarding house. A message about a foreign prison roster that might hold a face without a name. Nothing held long enough to stand. Mara Voss retired 5 years after the quiet began. She did not move away. She bought a small house near the river because she refused to give it to ghosts. Some mornings she walked the bridge at 3:07 a.m., the hour the figure with the duffel once crossed. The air bit at her cheeks. Trucks hummed on the far bank. She told herself the phantom was bones in silt or breath in another town, and that both could be true because truth has more than one room. On a shelf in records, the case lives among other cases that also do not end the way stories should. Some pages carry coffee stains and fingerprints from officers who are now grandparents. Some margins hold short notes in frustrated pen. Some photos look soft from being handled too often. Every time a new supervisor reorders priorities, the phantom moves up or down the list and remains exactly what he has been for years. A problem with no edge. People told the story at late hours the way people tell stories that help them feel ready. Parents used it as a reason for rules that seem strict until you remember the world is not gentle. Teenagers rolled their eyes, then checked their phones, then texted on arrival because even skeptics like to make their mothers breathe easier. True crime classes used the case as a puzzle. Podcasts used it as a hook. An industry grew around the title Unsolved because unsolved makes the heart tap faster and the mind start picking at threads. The city hated that, but also understood why it happens. We seek patterns because patterns feel like railings in the dark. The legacy of a killer who disappears is not a statue or a headline that ages and gets thrown out with old magazines. The legacy is the way a neighborhood looks at itself differently. The legacy is the safety meeting that no one skips now. It is the new light over the alley door. It is the bartender who takes a buddy to the dumpster as policy. It is a taxi co-op that installs cameras and shares a hotline number. It is the quiet that does not feel like peace, and the knowledge that some endings do not lock up. For the police, the case became a lesson with teeth. Some investigations are built like bridges, piece by piece, until you walk across to a clear, hard shore. This one walked out over water and found no land, just more water and a sky that would not show the way. Budgets tied to politics moved like weather. A camera caught a shadow and could not testify. A lab worked as fast as science allows and still felt slow under grief. There were ethical questions that did not have neat answers. How hard do you push a city to stay alert when alert becomes panic? How much fear can a department ask people to hold without making life smaller than it needs to be? How long do you keep a task force alive when new fires start every day? The story ends for now, the way it has ended every night since the quiet began. Doors lock, keys touch a table. A city turns off lights and leaves a few on for comfort. Some people sleep through. Some wake at 3:07 without a reason. Some walk to the kitchen and drink water and look at the window and see only their own face. Somewhere, maybe, a man who once had another name stands in a small yard and throws a ball for a dog. He waves at a neighbor and the neighbor waves back and does not know anything more than that. Somewhere, maybe, there is nothing left but bones under silt that will not rise and a file in a building that grows dust the way cities grow anything they do not use. You might want a name right now. You might want an address and a mugshot and a press conference where someone says the lines that promise relief. You do not get that here. You get a question you have to carry. Where does a person go when he vanishes on purpose? Does he thin out and become air? Does he set down his hunger and walk away? Or does he become the place he always loved most? The edge of light where a shape can look like anything if you glance too fast. Most criminals start in darkness and end in light, in a courtroom or a headline that scolds and then fades. The Phantom taught a different lesson. He taught that some stories do not end, they just stop. He taught that we love endings because they make us feel safe, and that bravery sometimes means living without one. If he is alive, he lives with a city that remembers him without a face. If he is dead, he is the one unsolved thing he never planned to be. The bridge still stands. The river still moves. People still walk home and call when they arrive. Somewhere, a patrol car rolls past a quiet block and the officer notes a dark van and circles back and finds nothing. Somewhere, a mother turns a shirt over in her hands and presses her face to it and decides she will keep pressing until the smell is gone, or until she can breathe without it. Somewhere, a detective drives home and promises herself she will try again tomorrow, even if tomorrow has no new answers. And somewhere, a story breathes without speaking and waits for someone to either close it or accept that some doors do not shut. That is the truth the Phantom left behind. A ghost in the shadows, an echo without a name, and a city that learned how to live with both. Thanks for listening. See you in the next episode. Question for you. Do you think the Phantom truly stopped? Was arrested under another name, escaped abroad, or blended back into normal life? And bonus, remember the exact time the bridge camera caught the figure with the duffel? I'll be looking for that answer in the comments.
Case closed. Archived in the synthetic vault. If you dare to return, the next file awaits. TrueCrime.exe. The line between fiction and fear.